Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a fun two slates, an NBA slate here and a college basketball slate. We'll do the NBA slate first here. We do have a little bit of an injury report, but surprisingly not that bad today. For Washington, Kyle Kuzma is out. For the Pelicans, Zion Williams is out. For Oklahoma City, Chet Holmgren is doubtful. For the Pelicans, McCollum and Murray are both out. For the Spurs, Sochan is out. So I also note that Malik Monk is doubtful to get for Sacramento. So with that said, we have some guys we do like quite a bit today. We'll start with our point guards, and Shea Alexander does look like a top overall play. He has struggled the last few games, but I think he'll eventually have a pretty big bounce back game, as his role is just too much here, especially with Holmgren likely out. His usage will get a nice bump, and it seems like those two guys have shared a lot of usage so far, but I think this game he'll have to take over, especially in a tougher matchup. So he's definitely an interesting spot there. Donovan Mitchell looks very interesting for Cleveland. Now he has been a inconsistent player too, but he definitely has a high upside potential in this one and a positive matchup. I also like Fred VanVleet as kind of a cheaper option here, as he has a lot of minutes lately. He's been a little bit more bust, but he's definitely capable of a giant game here. And then Ben Simmons, also some utility on the slate for Brooklyn, who's, when he does play, he does manage to score a decent amount of fantasy points. He does that with assists and rebounds mostly, but he's definitely capable of a good enough game here to pay off. Looking at our shooting guards, Cam Thomas is going to be top of our play here at this position. He's been pretty good at times throughout the season so far. He has a super high ceiling, and he's pretty decently priced. Not great price, but decently priced on the slate. But I do think he's a viable option here. Zach LaVine is probable today. He should play, but he's still a little bit. He might be a little gimpy here, but I think he's capable of a solid game. Anyway, in a smaller slate, he's definitely going to be somebody you have to look at. BJ Boston's emergence has really been a big boon for fantasy. His price has popped up though, so keep that in mind. But he's still in the range where he can definitely pay off. He's getting plenty of shots and a ton of minutes right now, so he's definitely worth a look here. And then Isaiah Joe is a nice cheap play that can help you pay up at other positions. Who's been playing pretty well in his mid 20s minutes. So, and he's been at around 20 fantasy points. He won't kill you. He won't help. He won't score 40 fantasy points or anything, but he's definitely capable. Case and Wallace also looks okay as kind of a contrarian play at the position. Like at small forwards, we do like Cam Thomas a lot for Brooklyn, as I said, and so he's definitely here as well. Jalen Williams for Oklahoma City is probably going to get a pretty big boost today if Chet Holmgren misses, and he has as highest ceiling as anybody as well. Zach LaVine can also play here, and so can BJ Boston. Look at our power forwards. Mobley is going to be top of our play. He can also play at center, but he's been pretty good so far this season, and he definitely has a lot of upside in this matchup, so he's definitely worth a look. Jalen Williams can also play here. Looking at our centers, we actually have quite a few centers look decent today, with Sengun probably being the top overall one. He hasn't been as consistent as we'd like, but he's definitely capable of a monster game here. Nick Claxton also looks interesting for Brooklyn, as he is getting more minutes, and that's going to give his fantasy potential higher. He definitely carries a little bit more risk there, though, so to keep that in mind. Wemby is very expensive, but if you can afford to roster a big guy, then he might be one of the top two with Shea Alexander. I think that Wemby has higher potential to have a monster game because he's been doing that more lately. And then Evan Mobley's kind of also capable of playing at this position. That's what we have for the NBA. Let's look at college basketball. So we have a pretty big slate here, with only one game being relatively close. In fact, the closest game here is a uh, 9 point game. So all these games are going to have some potential for blowouts. Uh, but if we look at the slate here, we got some players that we can kind of target. So we'll start with Virginia Tech with Young. For them, he's going to be a pretty high usage guy for this team, and he's underpriced today, so he's definitely worth a look here. He didn't do a whole lot last season, but he's in a good spot here. He's got a favorable matchup against Winthrop here, and so I think he's a great play on the slate. I also like Potet. from them, as he definitely draws some potential here for a decent game. Lower minutes, but has pretty good usage when he's on the floor. If we look at St. Peter's, meanwhile, this team has three guys that we actually kind of like because they're dirt cheap and they're going to have a ton of usage potential here. But Ziegler's the top overall play. He's definitely going to be a guy that I think has to have some potential on the slate because he's going to have a ton of minutes and he has the best usage on the team. So and Randolph are both decent kind of plays, but they're kind of high risk, high reward. Looking at Rutgers, Harper also looks like a high usage guy for this team. He's probably one of the better expensive plays on the slate, as he has some potential to have a big game here, and he's going to have one of the better scoring players on the slate, but he also does get some of that other you know type of stats. If we look at Florida, Will Richard is a guy that we're going to target today, as he does draw some good fantasy potential on this slate, and he has been playing pretty well so far with a lot of usage here as well. Looking at Iowa State, we do like Gilbert here for them. He's a little pricey today, but he's definitely got as much upside as anybody, and he does manage to get a decent amount of other stats. The question here is if he gets a full complement of minutes. If we look at Yale, this team has three guys that are actually kind of cheap for their potential. Now they do have extremely tough matchups, so keep that in mind. But Pocolatis is one of the guys. Townsend is one, and then Mbing. Now I do think that Townsend is probably my favorite play from the team, but you could look at those guys as kind of a stackable thing. But that's definitely a contrarian thing to do. Looking at Purdue, Fletcher Lawyer looks really good today. He's a little bit uh, scoring dependent, but he's definitely capable of a solid game here. If you want a little bit safer play when it comes to getting more peripheral stats, then Kaufman Green would be the guy for this team who has a lot of potential at a decent price point. Looking at UNC Greensboro. There's two players here that have some potential with Atwell being a pretty big usage guy with a lot of minutes here. Not He is a little bit scoring dependent though, so to keep that in mind. But Breath is a guy that can get some rebounds, and he's dirt cheap today. He's definitely somebody that you have to consider on the slate. Look at SMU. Miller for them is going to be their top player, and while his usage isn't perfect, he does get a lot of peripheral stats. So he definitely has some potential, but he's definitely high risk at this price point. Edwards for SMU looks very interesting as well. He's a little bit underpriced here for his potential because he does get a lot of peripheral stats, so he may not play a full complement of minutes in this game, so keep that in mind. And same goes for Trayor. He has some potential today with the rebounding boost, and he's dirt cheap. If we look at Marquette, we like a few guys from here in Joplin and Ross. Joplin has some good potential, and it's hard to find a lot of good forwards on this slate, so he's one of the better ones. He's got a really good upside on this slate, so he's definitely worth the looks. Chase Ross also looks interesting with a lot of peripheral potential today, and with but all these guys on this team have good usage, and even Jones. Those top three guys definitely have a lot of upside. Mercer has a guy that I think is probably a very interesting play here, and that's Ahmad Robinson. He has a lot of potential for at a cheap price point to get some minutes and some opportunity today, and I think he's in a great spot. If we look at DePaul, um, Rivera is probably my favorite play from the team. He definitely draws some good potential with some good usage on the slate. I think he's definitely going to get the most minutes from the team. And then last but not least for UCLA, Bilodeau is an interesting forward that you could utilize. It's going to be hard to find a lot of great forwards today, so looking at Bilodeau is somebody that I think has a lot of potential on the slate. With that said,